You sent the message, and now you're reading it back for the fifth time. Does that sound rude? Should I have added a comma there? Why did I say sounds good? Does that make me seem too eager or not eager enough? And then the reply comes. 2 words. Okay, thanks. And suddenly your brain is off to the races. Okay, thanks? Why okay? Why not great or perfect? Are they upset with me? Sound familiar? If you've ever replayed a conversation in your head long after it ended, if you've ever mentally rehearsed what you should have said at 2 a.m., if you've ever spent more energy analyzing a text than actually writing one, this video is for you. Because here's what people get wrong about overthinkers. They assume it's a quirk, a nervous habit, maybe even a flaw, something to just switch off. But what if I told you that the psychology behind overthinking conversations reveals something far more fascinating and far more human than a simple case of worrying too much? Let's talk about what's really going on inside the overthinker's mind. Imagine your brain is a theater. Most people, after a conversation ends, the curtain falls, scene over, the actors go home. But for an overthinker, the curtain falls, and then it rises again. The actors come back out. They run the same scene, but this time with different lighting, different blocking. What if I'd said this instead? The director, that's you, by the way, is obsessed with the performance. Psychologists call this post-event processing, and it's one of the hallmark features of social anxiety. But here's what makes it so interesting. It's not random. Your brain is doing this for a reason. It believes, somewhere deep in its wiring, that if it just runs the scene one more time, analyzes it enough, it can prevent future pain. It's trying to protect you. Think about that for a second. Your overthinking isn't a malfunction. It's your brain working overtime on your behalf. Researchers at Radboud University found that people who engage heavily in post-event processing tend to have an unusually strong theory of mind. That is, the ability to imagine what other people are thinking and feeling. In other words, overthinkers are often extraordinarily empathetic. They're not obsessing over a conversation because they're self-absorbed. They're obsessing because they care, sometimes too much, about how the other person felt. There's something beautiful in that, even when it's exhausting. But let's go deeper, because the theater metaphor only tells half the story. There's a concept in neuroscience called the default mode network, a set of brain regions that activate when you're not focused on the outside world. It's your brain's idle mode. And for most people, idle mode looks like daydreaming or mind wandering. For overthinkers, idle mode is a courtroom. Witness testimonies, cross-examinations. Why did she pause before answering? Was his tone different than usual? The gavel never actually comes down with a verdict, but the case is always in session. Your brain doesn't know how to just recess. And here's the thing about courtrooms. They run on evidence, but social situations are inherently ambiguous. Human communication is layered, messy, contradictory. We say one thing, mean another, express a third. So when an overthinker feeds incomplete social data into a highly analytical brain, the result is a loop. More analysis, more questions, more uncertainty. The detective story with no ending. Now, you might be wondering, okay, but where does this come from? Why do some people's brains work this way and not others? Part of the answer lives in childhood. Attachment theory, the work of psychologist John Bowlby, tells us that the way we learn to navigate close relationships early in life shapes our social nervous system for decades. Children who grew up in environments where the emotional atmosphere was unpredictable, where a parent's mood shifted without warning, where love sometimes came with conditions, those children learned to read the room, constantly, because their emotional safety depended on it. Hypervigilance about social cues isn't something they chose, it was something they learned to survive. And that skill, that radar, doesn't just switch off when you're an adult sitting in your kitchen reading a text message. But let's not stop at the past. Because overthinkers aren't stuck, they're sensitive systems operating in a world that rarely rewards that sensitivity. Here's a metaphor I love. Think of a high-resolution camera versus a standard one. Both cameras take photos, but the high-resolution camera picks up details the other one misses. Textures, shadows, nuances. It's more powerful, but it also takes longer to process. It uses more storage. It requires more from the system running it. Overthinkers are high-resolution cameras in a world optimized for quick snapshots. You notice the slight hesitation before someone speaks. You register the micro-expression that crossed their face. You remember the exact wording they used, and you compare it, unconsciously, to every other time they've spoken to you. That's not weakness. That's extraordinary social intelligence. The problem is that the processing power it demands is a lot. So what does this actually do to a person, day to day? It's draining, first of all. Genuinely exhausting. Because you're not just living through a conversation once, you're living through it 3, 4, 7 times. You're managing not just your own emotional experience, but your imagined version of everyone else's. By the end of the day, your brain has run a marathon that no one else can see. And then there's the paradox of connection. Overthinkers often crave deep, authentic relationships, and yet the very process of overthinking can create distance. You don't send the message because you're not sure it's right. You don't bring up the thing that's bothering you because you've already imagined 17 ways it could go wrong. You hold back. And in holding back, the intimacy you're craving stays just out of reach. It's a lonely loop to be stuck in. But here's where I want to offer you something different. Because most conversations about overthinking end with advice. Just stop, breathe, let it go. And while those aren't wrong, exactly, they're a little like telling someone with perfect pitch to just stop hearing the flat note. The sensitivity doesn't disappear. It needs to be redirected. Psychologist Susan Nolan-Hoeksema, who spent decades studying rumination, found that the antidote to an overthinking loop isn't to stop thinking. It's to interrupt the loop with engagement. Not distraction exactly, but active, embodied presence. A walk, a conversation, making something with your hands, something that pulls your brain's resources toward the present rather than the infinite corridors of the past and future. You can't outthink overthinking, but you can outlive it, moment by moment. And I think there's a deeper reframe available to you if you want it. What if overthinking, at its core, is a sign that you're someone who takes connection seriously, someone for whom words carry weight, someone who understands, maybe better than most, that what we say to each other matters? The world needs people who think carefully about how they show up for others, who replay conversations not out of narcissism, but out of a genuine desire to be good, to be kind, to be understood, to understand. The goal isn't to become someone who doesn't care. The goal is to learn when the courtroom can take a recess, to develop enough trust in yourself that you don't need to relitigate every verdict, to know that one awkward text, one imperfect conversation, one moment of fumbling honesty doesn't undo who you are to the people who matter. You are not the worst version of the conversation you're replaying. You are so much more than that. So the next time you catch yourself reading a message back for the 4th time, or lying awake reconstructing a lunch conversation word by word, try to pause before the judgment, before the, ugh, why am I like this? Ask instead, what is my brain trying to protect here? Because underneath every overthought conversation is a person who cares, deeply. And that, no matter how exhausting the theater in your head gets, is never something to be ashamed of. If this resonated with you, I'd love to know. Drop a comment below with the phrase, "I replay everything," if you're a fellow overthinker. And if you want to understand more about how your mind works, why you feel things so deeply, why connection means so much to you, there's a lot more where this came from. Stick around. Your brain, in all its overthinking, overfeeling, overanalyzing glory, deserves to understand itself.